So, the gentleman that, right here, that is on the left, this guy, of your screen is one Joel Greenberg. Joel Greenberg. Joel Greenberg is not having a good day. Joel Greenberg is not having a good week because Joel Greenberg, former Seminole County tax collector, has been charged with 33 counts, federally indicted on 33 counts, including sex trafficking crimes involving a 17-year-old. Now, the court documents are saying that he was engaged in a sugar daddy relationship with a 17-year-old. Why am I telling you this? Why am I giving you this information about some random tax collector being charged with 33 counts of sex trafficking, being in a sex trafficking ring with a child, with a 17-year-old? Why am I telling you that? I am telling you that because a Congress member, Gaetz, Gaetz, the Trumper part doesn't necessarily matter. He would say it does matter. He would say that it's politically motivated. But out of the investigation of that case, Gaetz was implicated. Now, Gaetz gets implicated because apparently there was money for sex of the 17-year-old. Now, the New York Times is reporting it as, and I'll just read it. The New York Times reported the Justice Department was investigating Gaetz for allegedly paying a 17-year-old girl to travel with him across state lines and inducing her to have sex, an act that would violate federal child sex trafficking laws. The investigation reportedly dates back to last summer when it was sprung from an ongoing Greenberg probe. According to the Times, the two men reportedly had sex with and trafficked the same 17-year-old girl. You also have payments, apparently, going from Gaetz to Greenberg and from Greenberg to several women. Now, the question, and what it boils down to, is was the girl underage? Meaning, Gaetz apparently is somewhat of a horn dog and has a reputation of being in Congress as being a show-off. Look at the women that I'm having sex with. Apparently, there was one unfortunate picture with a woman naked with a hula hoop, and he's like, I'm having sex with that woman. That one with the hula hoop right there, yeah, I'm gonna get it. Give me some of that. And he was showing this off to Congress. Now, as a man, well beyond 21, I have been in plenty of rooms where it's just us men. That's all. Even playing chess, no less. Even playing chess, where some nasty shit is said. The things that we say to one another. We used to have guys when we were playing with one another, and one guy we were playing Blitz, he's like, I'm gonna fuck you. And he's like, oh dude, that's over the top. Yeah, but that's what I'm gonna do. You'd be surprised at some of the things that men say to one another, especially about their sexual proclivities and their capabilities in that. It's masculinity, right? It's virility. Look how virile I am and how many women that I can bed in one night. Well, Gaetz is no different than that. Most people just don't do that in Congress and don't necessarily show it around to the degree that Gaetz did. Whether that is some kind of insecurity that is in Gaetz where he feels like he needs this kind of accolades from the public on this front, who knows? Either way, it does not do him well when he is in a sex investigation or there's an investigation about him sex trafficking. Now, Gaetz is saying, I didn't do this. It wasn't me. And he's saying that he's being, what was the word he used? Not exploited, extortion, that he's being extorted. Whatever he thinks, whatever he says, the investigation apparently is legit. Even though Gaetz is going to fight this, clearly. He hasn't necessarily been charged. He's still in Congress. He is taking the political weight and pressure of it and still remaining in office. His office apparently doesn't necessarily have any comment beyond him saying, this is not true. Gaetz, let me see, do I have this thing up? Yeah, right here. This basic, right here, I'll just flip to it. This baseless claim against me leaves me further convinced that the allegations against Congressman Gaetz are likewise fabricated and as an attempt to discredit a vocal conservative, Nelson concluded. Gaetz' response was basically he was being distorted. He thinks that it's because he backed Trump and that he was a conservative. And that because he was backed Trump and conservative that these baseless claims are being made about him. Well, I mean, the problem that Gaetz is going to have is that either that 17-year-old was a child, yay or nay. If that answer is true, okay. Did you have sex with that 17-year-old? Yay or nay. If the answer is yes, you have a problem. Did you cross state lines to have sex with that 17-year-old? Oh, that is even more problematic. And did you pay money to do so? And if not that 17-year-old, with other 17-year-olds? Because the problem is, if you were showing off all these women, is it possible that the women that you were showing off were women that you paid for? And if they can match that up with members' testimony in Congress, or for God's sake, if they can even match it up just using the application itself. I mean, these guys got their hands on records in Vimeo. What is this called? Vimeo, right? Where money that he paid went to the various women after going through Greenberg. One last point before I leave this, and why I say F.A. Gaetz is massively screwed. So this is right here. All right, so this is Joe Greenberg's lawyer, Fritz Scheller. Listen to what Fritz has to say. I mean, he's out there talking to the crowd and everything else. Listen to what he says.
Does Matt Gaetz have anything to worry about?
Does Matt Gaetz, that is such a... when it comes to what happened today in court. Does he have anything to worry about? And you're asking me to get into the mind of Matt Gaetz, right? And...
well, from your mind.
From my mind.
Based on what your client knows.
Based on what my client knows. Okay. See, I thought if I kept on talking and talking, I would avoid these questions and not to say, I'm sure Matt Gaetz is not feeling very comfortable today. All right?
I'm sure Matt Gaetz is not feeling very comfortable today. That's what he said. He was trying to find ways to, I don't know what he was trying to do out this. Because he was like, you want me to get in Matt Gaetz' mind? No. That's not what people are asking you to do. What they were asking you to do is, one, is your client guilty? That's basically what they're asking you. And if your client is indeed guilty, is Matt Gaetz implicated in that guilt? Meaning, does your client receive money from Gaetz? Your client would know that because your client would be the one receiving the money from Gaetz. Because your client set that same Gaetz up with various women to have sex with. And were those women under the age of 18? Nobody cares if they were 18 and older. Don't care one iota. In fact, I would even go so far as to say, I mean, it depends on the state, right? And it depends upon the country that you're in and everything else, where that age of 18 is arbitrary on some level. So fair enough. But within the context of a legal distinction and him being a particular person in politics and a political figure, what was that woman that got thrown out of Congress, despite the fact that she did nothing illegal and nothing wrong? And they showed all of these photos of the woman and everything else. Nothing she did was wrong. She got kicked out of Congress. And Gaetz is potentially here doing something illegal. So yeah, I don't necessarily have a soft spot for Gaetz on this. He should know better. He's funny. I love this guy. But he's trying to find a way of getting around it. But what he knows what they're asking him. You know, you, as the lawyer, you, right here, you know if your client is guilty. You know it. Your client knows whether or not he's guilty. Your client is about to make a plea deal. If your client is about to make a plea deal, then the question becomes, what is he pleading to, right? What is he pleading to? Because if you're pleading to something, you're basically saying, yeah, I'm guilty of X or I'm guilty of Y. And oftentimes you're pleading to something lesser than what you're guilty of. If he's indeed pleading to something, what is it? And is that plea deal contingent upon him exposing and talking about something that Gaetz is doing? Potentially something that Gaetz is doing is illegal. He knows what they're asking him. He just doesn't want to say it. But he says, yeah, Gaetz is probably not feeling all that comfortable right now. Yeah. Gaetz is probably not feeling all that comfortable right about now. Here's the other part, though. Gaetz is saying, I didn't do it. Gaetz is saying there's nothing to see here, being extorted, etc. I don't know. I mean, he looks guilty as sin on this. And to me, this is one of those things where either if the means to which he was getting paid and everything else is through an application, and if you can basically nail down the times and the women and so forth, meaning this is one of those cases that the government is just going to have to make. And they're going to have to be able to show the women, the times, the dates, the ages, etc. in order to make that case against Gaetz. Either way, it is somewhat politically damaging, I would imagine, one way or the other, just to be accused. And like I said, at this point, he hasn't been charged with anything. One last thing, though. The charges seem to get lesser. Think about where all of this began. And this is why I say, or is he guilty? When all of this began, it was something like a 12-year-old. That was like the splashy headline. Gaetz and a child. She's a teenager. But when people use the term teenager, they don't get the impression of a 17-year-old. Their impression is of a 13-year-old. There's a difference in those things. There just is. And so initially, it came across as if he's with a toddler, something like that. I'm being hyperbolic, but a very young child. I think they said like 13 or 12 or 13 years old. And then eventually it became a sugar daddy relationship. Like if you listen to the language of it over the course of the last few days have changed in regards to the tenor of the investigation. So instead of the splashy headline of this kind of child or adolescent, now you're at 17-year-old. And look, whatever you think of whether or not 17-year-olds hooking up with older men is fine or not fine, I would imagine it's kind of going to depend upon where you are and whatnot. It's somewhat secondary from the legalities of it. And it's possible that he broke the law. But this is one of those things the government is going to have to prove. For Gaetz, his problem is depending upon whatever that plea deal this cat struck. If Greenberg struck a plea deal where he threw Gaetz under the bus, oh man, Gaetz is screwed. Gaetz is screwed. So we're going to see Gaetz needs to drop the soap. Oh man, don't take the bait, Jamarl. Don't take my bait. This means he's guilty. Well, I don't know if he's guilty. Let's just say I don't know if he's guilty. I mean, the way I see it, this is one of those things they have to prove or not prove. And this is something that is, it's not like, it's not what I think at that point, if that makes sense. It's something that you should be able to know. It's knowable. And yeah, if the government is going to put somebody up like that, they got to prove it. By the same token, he looks guilty. He looks guilty of sin, especially if dude is coming out saying, yes, I am guilty, and I was here with this guy, and here are the records to show it. Here are my PayPals. Here's my Venmo. Here's my thing. Here's the woman's name. Here's this woman's name. And yes, they were 16 or 17 at the time. Yeah, you fucked. And dude would have the notes, because the problem is through your transactions. Like if I'm buying, dog sitter, if I'm buying, I don't know, if I'm paying somebody for a service, what are you using? PayPal, Cash App, or whatever. That stuff is electronic, meaning there's a signature associated with all of it. And so it's not like he has to, come up all these paper records. The stuff is just there. So yeah, if he's doing a plea deal, and if this guy's just not, jerking people around, it is possible that Gaetz is screwed royally. Royally. So I'm going to say like, I'm going to say share, I'm going to say subscribe. Again, this is not me saying he's guilty, because again, they've kept moving the bar. New York Times, the way it started, was like 12 years old or something, and then it became 17. And so it's like, all right, what's true of this? And if you guys are moving the bar, then the reality of what's going on here may not entirely be all that clear. But again, that's why you have investigations. One way or the other, though, he is taking a hit politically on this, and calling it extortion. I don't know where the extortion stuff comes in. I haven't seen it. But if Greenberg is talking, Gaetz better get a lawyer. Like, share, subscribe.